Carl Sagan reminds us that planet Earth, the pale blue dot, is the only home we have. The challenge is to think cosmically and act locally. This morning's contemporary reflection is being shared by members from the Pitt Street Uniting EarthWeb team. Meredith Knight is going to talk about her involvement in the community choir Capella as one way of highlighting and protesting ecological concerns. Gerard McEvilly, a horticulturalist by profession, is going to talk about worm farming. Vivien Langford is going to draw on her experience with a community radio program, Beyond Zero Emissions, to highlight concerns about climate change. And finally, Jolyon Bromley is going to read from Bill McKibben, the founder of the activist organisation 350.org. Bill McKibben takes us back to the global stage with a provocative image of what is really happening with global warming.
As Warren has said, I am a member of Capella, which is an environmental choir that sings about the beauty of the world and the struggle to protect it from exploitation and degradation. Music is a powerful medium that can communicate a message which encourages positive change in people's thoughts, attitudes and behaviour. Through Capella's motto, causing harmony to the environment, Capella takes our educational message into a variety of communities, embracing a wide range of events, including benefit concerts, campaign launches, community gatherings, protest rallies, and folk and choral festivals. Our performances include rousing protest songs and topics on everything from global warming to laments about the loss of forests and animal species, the ills of fossil fuel practices, the importance of renewables, and ways of adopting a more ecologically sustainable lifestyle. Over the past year, Capella has supported the affirmative actions of local communities and activists, including gathering outside the offices of Origin Energy in Martin Place during their 2015 AGM, to draw attention to the suicide the week before of third-generation farmer George Bender, whose soil and water supply in Queensland's Darling Downs had been poisoned by coal seam gas bores, over which he had had no control. Bender had battled to keep Origin off his land for over 10 years, enduring a campaign of threats and relentless bullying. Sadly, many other rural and Indigenous communities throughout Australia are suffering these same tactics from gas and mining companies. Capella has supported campaigns against the planned relocation of the historic township of Bulga in the Hunter Valley, threatened by the expansion of a Rio Tinto open-cut coal mine. We've joined the Knitting Nanas and other activists outside the offices of AGL and Santos, remonstrating these companies' harmful fossil fuel activities, and outside New South Wales Parliament, decrying the state government's stringent new protest laws. We have mourned with eastern suburbs residents and others the government-sanctioned removal of magnificent trees outside Centennial Park, and are currently dissenting the destruction of native bushland at Walleye Creek and trees in Sydney Park for the highly questionable West Connects motorway. Capella is a very busy choir, performing at over 60 diverse events each year. We sing many lively and satirical songs, and even when the mood becomes serious, the beauty and solemnity of the music is uplifting. Most of our songs are written by choir members. We have released 2 CDs, with another one on the way. The choir has branches in Sydney and other parts of New South Wales and the ACT, which regularly meet together for rehearsal weekends and performances. We are always on the lookout for more members. Capella is welcoming, inclusive, and yes, we have fun. To me, there is nothing quite as energising and inspiring as singing with others about something about which I feel and believe in so passionately: our amazing Mother Earth.
I got a bit confused actually, because I thought our topic this week was compost, not cosmos. But when I looked up cosmos, it actually means the universe regarded as a complex and orderly system, the opposite of chaos. So compost is not that different. It's a chaotic mixture of all sorts of waste: banana peel, rotten cabbage from the back of the fridge, tea bags. A chaotic mixture that composting turns into a uniform, crumbly, fertile product. And this can be used to grow healthy plants and so complete the cycle. So that's one of the environmental benefits. It turns waste into goodness, and we certainly need less waste. In fact, we're running out of places to dump landfill. And just imagine how much diesel is burned carting our waste away. And honestly, what a legacy to leave our grandchildren. But our kitchen scraps are much, much worse than just wasted resources. They're actually dangerous to the planet. Please don't think they just break down harmlessly in landfill. They do break down, but because of the lack of air, this breakdown produces methane gas, which is one of the greenhouse gases. It's 84 times more potent than CO2. When we downsized to a unit from a house and garden, I had to downsize my composting activity too. So I got a free worm farm from the council and started using worms to do the same job, but on a small scale. I really encourage you to consider this, and I'm happy to assist. In fact, I brought some along today, especially for Sue and Sid, who are just getting theirs going. So firstly, worm farming turns waste into plant food. Secondly, it massively decreases what you send off to landfill. And thirdly, it makes a big difference to greenhouse gas emissions. And it might even be free if you've got a friendly council. So think about it. It's a small thing we can do, all of us, to make a cosmic difference. In some churches at this time of year, they bless the animals. But do we ever think of blessing the worms?
My talk's about radio. Radio catches people in an intimate way. So even though people don't want to talk to me about climate change, they might be fascinated by a scientist in Antarctica reading an ice core. She might tell us about the human impact on the atmosphere in the recent industrial era that's visible to her in the ice. Listeners might then think for just a moment about the cosmic threat our emissions are creating. So I produce a 1-hour podcast every Monday at Radio 3CR. We report on climate action in the community. It's a bit like the story Meredith was telling us, those same communities. We visit them and we interview them. And there are two battlefronts as I see it. The battle against coal and gas and the battle for renewables and a decarbonised economy. The first battlefront is where farmers and citizens fight off the coal and gas companies who are ripping up the land and using up and even poisoning the underground water. When I interview them, they often are not keen to talk about climate change or the climate impact of the coal and gas. But when they win, as recently at Corunna Downs and Gloucester, and hopefully soon the Liverpool Plains, the carbon that is not mined is like a climate bomb that is never exploded. So secretly, it's a win, in my opinion, though they do not want to talk about climate change. I've really come to love these country people who have made allies with us in the city, inviting us into their struggle and forgetting the political divisions, uniting us. So I feel I also have to channel some of the grief when people are forced to leave. One example is the Bylong Valley. I got a letter from a farmer who's been the mainstay of the local Progress Association, who's lent his support to climate struggles all around the state. He's been active preserving farmland against the mines, but he has decided to sell. His partner cannot stand the strain anymore, and I can identify with that. KEPCO, the South Korean mining company, will buy their place, but there will be a gag clause once the contract is signed. He writes to me, no media, no social media, no protesting, no letter writing, no sticking up for what's right, even if there are wrongs being done, and definitely no submissions or presentations to the Planning Assessment Commission forever and ever. Amen. He continues, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is there to hear it, does it make a sound? If a mine, any mine, destroys a valley and no one is there to see it and no one is able to say anything, is it really all that bad? Well, this man has a very large and cosmic view of his responsibility to the land and to his neighbours. And I will make sure that this tree falling will make a very loud crash on the radio. I'll interview other people in the valley who can tell the story and who will make sure that at least our 10,000 listeners will know that the climate war is ruthless. It's also profoundly lonely, in my case, as most people don't want to talk about it. So some of us are at war, even though the connotations are terrible. My show for tomorrow is about mobilising as in World War II. This is the second battlefront, with the urgent rollout of renewable energy and energy efficiency and reforestation and a change in consumer behaviour is planned and achieved without crushing the economy. People who talk about this invoke the Second World War mobilisation. And Bill McKibben in a recent article said, we're under attack from climate change and our only hope is to mobilise, as we did in World War II. Now, I interviewed Bill McKibben, and apart from being the founder of 350.org, he told me he's a Methodist Sunday school teacher. And I think that's one of his proudest roles. His aim is to inspire and energise people and to remind them of the immorality of doing nothing about climate change. I have asked Jolyon to read a part of McKibben's article in a moment. And before that, we'll hear a little bit of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Now, I listened to a lot of the fireside chats because McKibben mentions that, and I wondered what sort of leadership we need to get this mobilisation. It's just not going to happen unless we have the right thought pattern. So I listened to a lot of the fireside chats, and I found that Roosevelt sometimes had an audience of 60 million people tuning in at 10 p.m. He'd ask them to have a map in hand so he could explain where the hot points of the war were and why they had to make a massive effort to supply food and armaments and soldiers to embattled Europe. He didn't appeal to hatred and fear, but he inspired confidence and belief in the creativity of the people. Imagine if our leaders today included us all and took us along in a project we can be proud of. We all know about climate change. I don't think there's that much denialism, but we don't want to think about it. And that's where I think a leader like Roosevelt would be great. So here is a little bit of Roosevelt speaking, and then Jolyon will read a part of McKibben's article called A World at War.
My fellow Americans, as you know, I have recently come back from a trip of inspection of camps and training stations and war factories. In some communities, employers dislike to employ women. In others, they are reluctant to hire Negroes. In still others, older men are not wanted. We can no longer afford to indulge such prejudices or practices. In one community that I visited, a perishable crop was harvested by turning out the whole of the high school for 3 or 4 days. And in another community of fruit growers, the usual Japanese labor was not available. But when the fruit ripened, the banker, the butcher, the lawyer, the garage man, the druggist, the local editor, and in fact every able-bodied man and woman in town left their occupations, went out, gathered the fruit, and sent it to market. In a sense, every American, because of the privilege of his citizenship, is a part of the selective service. We are united in seeking the kind of victory that will guarantee that our grandchildren can grow and under God may live their lives free from the constant threat of invasion, destruction, slavery, and violent death.
McKibben describes the reality of global warming as a world war. It's a provocative idea. This is what he writes. In the north, this summer, a devastating offensive is underway. Enemy forces have seized huge swathes of territory. Each passing week, another 22,000 square miles of Arctic ice disappears. In the Pacific this spring, the enemy staged a daring breakout across thousands of miles of ocean, waging a full-scale assault on the region's coral reefs. In a matter of months, long stretches of formations like the Great Barrier Reef, dating back past the start of human civilization and visible from space, were reduced to white boneyards. World War III is well and truly underway, and we are losing. It's not that global warming is like a war, It is a world war, and we are losing. We're used to war as a metaphor, the war on poverty, the war on drugs. Usually this is just a rhetorical device, a way of saying we need to focus our attention and marshal our forces to fix something we don't like. But this is no metaphor. By most of the ways we measure wars, climate change is the real deal. Carbon and methane are seizing physical territory, sowing havoc and panic, racking up casualties and even destabilising governments. The question is not, are we in a world war? The question is, will we fight back? And if we do, can we actually defeat an enemy as powerful and as inexorable as the law of physics? McKibben's words are a challenge to each of us, to be better informed and to do what we can to save our planet, the only home we have.